Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, we're live, folks. You guys are all set?
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call our meeting to order. Everyone, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which
to stand.
under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Our first item is the consent agenda. Recommended action to approve the following items which are included in the consent agenda. 5A minutes, 7A public, 7F AV reduction, 7G resolution for the disposal of personal property, 7H resolution for the disposal of personal property, and 7J special education. May I have a motion, please?
Second.
Any discussion? Alrighty, please vote.
Forgot to start the meeting.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, who made the first? I'm so sorry. John and Ron. John and Ron. That's what I thought. Okay, open voting. Seven yes.
Great. Moving on, we have a presentation this evening from Kyle Lucier, our CPA, and he is via Zoom, and we will turn it over to you, Kyle.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me tonight. I just want to thank everyone for the opportunity again this year to perform the audit for Lake Placid School District. It's really nice to getting up there and being able to work with you guys every year. It's nice getting there to see Dana, Betsy, Shelly, and Tracy, and they help us out while we're there and make it nice and easy for us to do our work while we're there and get through everything. So I guess I'm just gonna kind of jump right into what we're doing. I mean, when we do the audit, we're giving an opinion on the financial statements that were presented to us. So in doing that, we are looking at we do a bunch of testing on payroll, disbursements that go out. We do some journal entry testing, and we do cash receipt testing. What we're doing is we're looking at we're doing those testings. We're looking at controls, and making sure that the district is following the controls that they have set in place for make sure the proper procedures are being done for when money goes out the door or when money comes in the door. And so we don't do the control testing to issue an opinion on the controls themselves. We do the testing of the controls to give us just more of a assurance that on the expenses and the revenues that are presented. So saying that, I mean, in doing the testing, we did not notice any issues that we needed to disclose to the board at all. So the other things that we do during the audit is we do a lot of just tying out of balance sheet accounts, tying out of revenues that the district receives from the state. We will compare the cash reconciliations and compare them to the GL cash numbers. We look at payroll expenses and in the GL and compare them to the 941 federal filings. Again, we look at the state aid reports, that this reports that this of funds that the state has given the school district, to make sure that they're in the right, that they're recorded, and that they're in the right account codes for that the state wants to see them in. We do the same thing with grant income and expenditures. We'll look at the federal award documents and make sure that they're not being overexpended, and that the revenues and the expenditures are matching. And then one of the other things that we do is we test disbursements made at the very beginning of the next fiscal year after the year end that we've audited. And we're doing that to do what we call cutoff accuracy, to make sure that there's no expenses that are being paid in the next year that really need to be accounted for in the year that we're auditing, so that's, that's a lot of, those are some of the big things that we do during the audit. Some of the other services that we do for Lake Placid as well is when we prepare the financial statements. So the district gives us their trial balance, and that's what we use to do our audit from, and do our testing and compare the numbers. And then from there, we take all those numbers and prepare the financial statements that you guys will see in your packets. The other thing that we do is in the single audit packet that you guys have, there's also the CFA, which we also prepare as well, or help prepare, that is the schedule for all the federal awards that were expended during the year. Is there anybody have any questions on anything we've gone over so far? Oh. All right, we'll move on. So I don't really plan to go go too deep into the financial statements unless anyone has any certain questions. I'd be more than happy to answer questions people have on anything specific, but just looking at the financial statements, the biggest, the thing that I think most people will like to look at is just the governmental funds part of it, which starts on page 13 of the financial statement report. So if you're all looking at a PDF, it might not be, if it's not page 13 of the PDF, it's going to be page 13 of the report. It's on the numbered pages on the report. And page 13 just has all of the governmental funds. So it's the general fund, special aid fund, capital projects fund, and then you'll see non-major special revenue funds, and that's like kind of a catch-all for the other smaller funds. And at the end of the financial statement report, you will see those that non-major special revenue fund broken down into the individual funds, so you can see the numbers for each of those individual funds there if you'd like to see that. But the big thing in there is just, if you go look at total governmental funds for the year, we're seeing that about 10.9 million in assets, 1.5 million in liabilities, with a total fund balance of almost 9.4 million. Then over on page 15, we see the statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance. And again, that's just where we're going to see all the revenues, expenses, any transfers in or out of the funds themselves as well. So the number I like to go to right there is so it says excess of revenues and other sources over expenditures, which is the change in fund balance number. So the change in fund balance for governmental funds for the year is governmental funds increased by 233,000 during the year. I guess I'll stop there, because for the actual financial statement, I don't really have much more to say about that. But if anyone else has any questions they want to look at, I'm more than happy to answer them. All right, we're moving on. All right, basically the next thing to just go over with you guys real quick is the is in the single audit file here that we have. So again, in the single audit, we are the reason why we're doing the single audit is because it's a requirement. Because the school district expended more than $750,000 in governmental funds during the year. Again, what we're doing is we're looking at the internal controls over those expenditures as a way of designing our audit procedures for the compliance testing. So just like I said before, the purpose of us looking at those controls is not to issue an opinion on the controls themselves, but to help us understand the expenditure process. Again, we did not identify any issues in our testing of the expenditures that we need to bring to the board. We did not find any issues with compliance in the federal awards. So you'll see in here we have we call a clean opinion on the compliance of the spending of those federal awards. And sorry, I guess I did forget to mention that when I was going over the financial statements as well, that we didn't find any issues with the financial statements. There was no material adjustments that had to be made. We found so everything on the financial statements themselves were also a clean opinion too. Just real quick, what on this single audit packet on page 6 of the packet is the schedule for expenditure of federal awards. And here that's where you'll see that the district spent $1,063,000 in federal awards during the year. And so that is the number that triggers the need for that single audit. And in there you can see all the different federal programs where the funds came from. Just real quick on this too. And what based off what I'm looking at, unless there's a change in the federal funds for in this next year to audit, it does look like there's a good chance that the single audit will probably need to be done again with the next financial audit. Last thing I have here is just at the very end of the single audit report, we have just a schedule of our findings, and the only finding we have this year is the 4% rule in New York for the New York State requirement. So I'm just going to read that real quick. It says New York State real property tax law requires school districts to maintain their unrestricted fund balance at or below 4% of the ensuing year's appropriations, and the school district's actual percent is at 22.8% of the next year's general fund budget. So I mean, so that's a New York State requirement that's why it's there. New York State puts out that the schools are going to need to be under that 4%. The corrective action we have from the school reads that Lake Placid Central School District has taken a conservative approach to spending as state aid remains uncertain. The Board of Education plans to use its fund balance in the future budgets to provide stability to taxpayers in a fiscally responsible manner. And we find that acceptable to us as auditors for our report. I told this to the audit committee, one thing you do need to be cautious of though is this is a New York State requirement. They do look at this as part of funding needs, I think. So it's just something to make sure you're aware of as well. And I'm pretty sure you guys are already, but leaving it over that 4% for too long could have some negative impacts. So just something to be aware of. In the same section of the single audit report here, it says the prior year's findings. I just want to point this out because that excess unassigned fund balance was in there last year, something that repeated again this year. But one thing that didn't have that was our finding last year was a reconciliation of account balances on the financial statements, and that was something that we did not incur this year. I want to point out that Dana and Betsy and their team we noticed how they worked hard in that year, in the 4 year end 24, to make sure all those accounts were reconciled. And we could tell how hard they worked when we were to do that when we were there doing the audit. So I just wanted to point out that we did notice that. We noticed hard work and appreciate it. So I guess that's all I have. I'll open it for any questions.
I guess not, Kyle.
Thanks, Kyle.
Thanks so much.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kyle. We'll see you next summer.
Thanks.
All right,
Kyle.
take care.
Moving on to,
Would you explain that again to a newcomer, the 22% and the 4%? You seem to be giving us a cautionary.
Sure, well, yes, if you look at it by statute, school districts are only allowed 4%. We're the only municipality that's allowed 4%. I think village and towns are allowed 12, 15%.
Exactly.
By the way, I don't even think they have a cutoff.
And they do what they want anyway.
Right.
There's no
The state has a 15%, 4%. Really, this came about, if you look at it, it jumped, when I came in to this position in 2018, we were sitting at about 8 or 9%. What really caused us to jump was 2 COVID years where we had to budget as if it was a normal year and our expenses were down considerably. So we saw a huge jump in it. And the state auditors came through here a year.
Expenses went down in COVID?
Yeah, because we couldn't do field trips and all that, so we budgeted
balance
as
went
if,
up.
we budgeted as if it was going to be a normal year. But because we couldn't do a lot of trips and things like that, we ended up having a larger excess in the fund balance. So really, that kind of came over 2 years, and we saw a big jump in our fund balance because of that. Last year, we had budgeted $1 million of it to be used towards the budget, and we didn't have to use any of it because we had such a very healthy rate of return of interest, coupled with slightly lower than what we budgeted for expenses. Not unusual, but when you put those two combinations together, we ended up not having to use the appropriated fund balance of $1 million. That we originally budgeted. This year we're budgeting like $860,000 of that. So the plan is always there to use it. So it always depends on other revenue sources. It's the last thing that we dip into for our revenue.
Does the fund balance, the use of it help keep the tax rate down? If you use $1 million of fund balance.
It
would
would,
affect the rate.
yes. Yeah, we budgeted it, and again, with the excess, we have last couple of years with our tax rate is our rate of increase is anywhere from 2.5% to 3.5% for the taxpayers.
Right.
And we try to maximize that because if you don't maximize it, it's lost for future years.
Got it.
So we try to maximize that, but for us, that's about a $500,000 increase from year to year, typically speaking. So yes, the idea there is just that. We definitely have plans as to how to spend it down. As Kyle said, the state is probably coming out with a new state aid formula in December, which we could see a drastic impact on that. We potentially saw it this past year where we were seeing nearly $800,000 loss in state aid all in 1 year. So we anticipate that's going to come to reality this next budget year.
Can you predict from year to year what the reduction might be, and what are the criteria that the state used to?
They have not come out with the new formula. They're doing a study now. It'll come out next month. But what I did was last year when the governor put out her executive budgets, we were seeing a nearly 44% reduction in state aid. So I said, okay, projecting out,
Right.
that might be the number the state wants to get us to, maybe not in a year, but maybe in 2 or 3 years. So I've used that as a basis to project out over the next few years, saying, okay, we can see a loss over these next few years, that maybe by year 3 or year 4, it gets to where that formula had us at that,
Got it.
So otherwise, we're taking a stab in the dark in terms of what the formula is going to look like. We should know come December and January in terms of what that formula looks like. Be able to plan going ahead.
And if that money stays there, does that set off any red lights in Albany anywhere on anybody's desk?
Yes, we had the state come in a little over a year ago and actually do their audit from the controllers. And at that time, they were told from their higher ups not to look at fund balances, recognizing that districts were coming out of COVID years and that fund balances were going to be higher than typically you would see. So it's a red flag, absolutely. In theory, the state could even say to a district, you can't raise your tax levy until you spend down your fund balance.
Or partition it to established reserves.
Right, that's the other, yes, that's the other avenue.
Not just moving it takes care of it?
Moving it to different reserve categories that we
okay,
have.
okay.
It's the fact that it's unrestricted, and so it's that percentage as a
Like
portion.
we created
If you
2
move it
years.
to If you move it to a reserve, it becomes restricted, then if it's not used, does it go to fund balance?
So the general fund feeds the fund balance.
Okay.
And so whatever's done there, and then being the reserves, the state wants us to see those tap into those reserves
Right.
on a regular basis,
Yes.
like for our employee benefits.
I see.
And
for our-
depending on the reserve you put it in, it really limits where you can move it once it's there.
Once it's there.
Yes.
Got it.
One of the state auditors did say, when they looked at our restricted reserves, the one thing they are looking at is movements. It's not meant to stay there and be stagnant. So over the last couple of years, our EBLAR, our employee, retirement restricted funds, we have been pulling a little from that each year to offset our retirement tax deferred payments when someone retires. So that has actually gone down. When I first started, it was pushing almost $1 million, and we're down a little over 700,000. I have to pull up an audit, but we dip into that a little bit. If we had a big property tax refunds, we have a tax surcery reserve that we can pull from. 2 years ago, we created the repair reserve of $1 million.
Mhm.
Once the auditorium starts, hopefully in the springtime, that will eat up about $1 million of that reserve.
Even our weight room changes, that was born by.
It kind of went through there, but it really, we had some leftover funds from the capital project that we were able to tap into to really offset and pay for the fitness center, stuff like that. So
Thanks.
we have plans, yes, that we will explain to you guys as it comes up. We'll let you guys.
Thanks, David. With regard to the cause, Karen, do we have anything?
We do not, there are no emails.
We have nothing in information for the public. And then we have the report section. I guess I am up to give, I attended virtually this summer the NISBA conference that was being held in New York City. And it's just a great opportunity now that they're offering a lot of trainings and conferences virtually because all of us have jobs and we're very busy. So it was a really great 2-day conference. I was able to pick and choose which titles that I wanted to pop in. One was school safety, which was really interesting. And not that this is anything new, but discovered that there were a lot of things that we are already doing here really well in regard to our school safety. They were talking about tapping into Secret Service, how they offer trainings both virtually and in person for districts via the congressional office. And again, we are already doing some of these things. They said that most of the school violence, their data shows that 94% of it is preventable because these students are talking amongst themselves. They're posting on social media before things happen. They're talking to someone in school, whether it be a teacher, a parent, sometimes a school resource officer. So that was very interesting to hear that. They talked about swatting the number of prank calls that are coming into districts as a result of a lot of the news that's in the, the media when something does happen. There's a new program, and maybe it's not new, but it's called Stop the Prop, which is leaving doors open in the school. And a lot of the participants were talking about how that is an issue in a lot of the schools. That it's done most of the time accidentally. People aren't thinking, they stuff a chair inside the door or a book or something to keep it open. But there is a program about that. And then one other thing they talked about to keep districts on their toes is the timing of when they do like drills during the day to make them inconvenient. So to catch the teachers and the students off guard, do it during lunchtime when things are chaotic or whatever, versus doing it like a nice quiet time of the day, at the beginning of the day or whatever. It's no different than, for example, in a childcare center where they do fire drills during nap time. It's not fun to have to get the little ones out during nap time, but it keeps them on their toes. The other part that I found really interesting was school board governance. And again, after I listened to this long repertoire from different districts, we're in pretty good shape here. And I don't mean that to tap us on the back, but listening, they brought up some really good points, because I know sometimes maybe we feel that we're not apprised of everything that goes on, but there are two categories. They said the need to know versus the nice to know. So there are things that we need to know about, and then there are things that it's nice to know about, but we really don't need to be apprised about everything. So I thought that was really interesting. The other big issue that they talked about, and I was a little bit flabbergasted by this, is the length of meetings that other districts are dealing with. And it's not necessarily needed. Some of these meetings are going on 3-4 hours in length, and it's because most of the time they're not adhering to the agenda. They go off topic, things get personal and gossipy, and then these meetings turn into 3 or 4 hours. So I think we're pretty much on task where that is concerned. The other thing that they mentioned is that they pointed out that our meetings are held in the public, but we are not a public meeting. And by that, what it means is when we bring in those open sessions where the public can comment, they're recommended, but those times are not required. Our district offers 2. So we're offering 2 chances for the public to come forward where it's not even required. So in a nutshell, I think overall we're doing a really good job here when I listen to stories from other districts across the state. So kudos to all of you. So
We had a gold star. I
yeah,
love it.
I know.
Good.
I just
Clean audit, good operation.
yeah, no, it's just so anyway, I think we're all doing a great job. I think we all work together, and there's a lot of congeniality amongst us. But again, when I was listening to some of the other ones, there's a lot of some people were talking about hostility on their boards, and it's a lot. So anyway, that's my report, and I would just encourage anybody, if you have any time, some of these trainings are awesome, and you kind of get to hear from other people and their experiences. So if you have an opportunity, try to tap in. Moving on to our treasurer's report. Dana, you're on.
Right, so we have the treasury report for the month of October, and what you'll see is in the first box. This is kind of where you see, you're going back to where our restricted and unrestricted funds lie. And you'll see that New York class unrestricted, a little over 12 million, and then the restricted reserves are, we keep those separate, and they're about $2.7 million. So that's kind of where they sit. You can see we, again, at this moment in time, we have got a little over $2.9 million in our operating fund at the end of October. And that's just about the time as money coming in, how quickly we move it into 9 class. So when you see a number that large in our operating funds, it means we just hadn't moved it into 9 class by the time reconciliation occurred. Because normally we like to keep that operating funds, well below $1 million and keep everything else in the insured cash sweep or the, 9 class. And then as the year progresses, we move money out of the 9 class into the ICS and then into the operating funds to pay our bills. So anytime we have a payroll and anytime we do a check warrant and we're paying our bills, we move money to cover that in. Otherwise, we purposely, try to keep our operating fund accounts, probably about $400,000 or $500,000. We're at the end of the tax collecting season. You can see we're kind of winding down in terms of cash receipts. We only took in a little under $5 million for October. So we're at that point where we're probably hitting our height for cash receipts versus cash disbursements. We took in more than we paid out. We'll start to see that reverse over the next few months because we collect over 80% of our revenue in the first couple months, as we said. So, and we just pull from our funds throughout the year to pay the bills. So we'll start seeing those numbers go down. But all in all, I mean, this is a typical treasury report for us. We're healthy with flush with cash.
Thanks, Dana. Now again for the budget performance report.
All right, I changed up the format here, just to, try to,
Keep us guessing.
with that.
Keep us guessing.
Yeah, just to kind of give you, we used to do it this way a couple years ago and all that, so I figured change it up rather than just showing you a bar graph and all that. You can just see it pretty straightforward, and percentage difference and all that. There's really nothing, unusual here. You can see that, our expenditures are up a little under 4% from last year. That is about what we budgeted. I think our budget's increase was about 3%. So we're on par from, our increase this year over last year. You can see there's some differences here, minor differences with contractual and BOCES down 2.5% and materials and supplies down 30% at this moment in time. That's just about timing when things are being purchased and things like that. That's really what that comes down to. In the end, you can see our debt service is up 88%. And I think I talked about that last month. That's because of our change. We are purchasing our buses. So we had to make payments up front as opposed to towards. So typically, at this time of year, we would only have about a $15,000 to $16,000 debt payments. But because of how we changed the nature of buying our buses, we had a larger debt payment up front as opposed to previous years. And that's really, the difference there. For revenue, again, it's about on par with where we would, typically see with the budget increase that we had from last year. Taxes are up 3.34%. That's about what the increase was for our tax base. Charges and services, only 5%. Use of money is 16%. That is right there, that use of money, that is where our interest is lying. So you can see that we increase our interest. One of the things that we do have separated out, but it still falls into interest, is our restricted reserves. The interest we make off of that, we keep it separate, so that it can be accounted for the reserve accounts and everything else we put back in.
Is that a higher rate?
It's still around 5% that we're getting. Yeah, haven't seen it change. I know the Fed's just lowered the key rate a week or so ago, so we're starting to see it tick down a little bit. They're predicting another drop in the key rates this coming month in December. So we'll start seeing that dip down below 5%. Right now, it's still better than it was 3 years ago. Miscellaneous, you'll see that's a 91% increase. And that's really just, tied to Sarah Allen, when she went to a meeting last year for special ed, found out that we can actually bill the county for some services. So what's driving that is the fact that over these last 2 cycles, we've actually been able to recoup. Last year, we got about $16,000 from the county, and this year we got $13,000. So that's where you're seeing the big change there, is because last year we didn't realize we could do this until springtime. So now that we know it, you know, we were able to submit that and reimbursements early on, and the county was really quick about paying it. So we got up to $13,000 from the county this year, and that's for our kind of our preschool special ed services that we get reimbursed from the county. But all said and done, you know, again, we are, you know, on track in terms of what our budget looks like for this year compared to last year in terms of expenses and revenue. Questions?
Questions, anyone? We are moving on to the operations committee report. I don't see anything here.
No, nothing, you know, I'll just give an update because I mentioned the auditorium.
Okay.
I think in 2 weeks, I'm meeting with Mosaic. We're gonna have our pre-bid meeting, because then we'll put out a bid out for the auditorium work early January, with the idea of having that work be done between April with a completion date of September 1st. So basically, wanting it to be done. My guess is if it happens, it's gonna happen more towards the end of the spring, maybe early summer, but the bid that's gonna go out will have a September 1 deadline. So it will be all done come the beginning of the school year. So that's really, you know, that's a multi-year process that's finally.
So let me ask you, when we do that, do we have a penalty clause in the bid package if they don't make it on the first?
There's generally something like that. I mean, I remember back in our capital projects that we did a
Yeah.
couple of years ago. There's vague wording
Yeah.
when it comes to that. This project is so small that
Okay.
we probably, I mean, really, we're replacing the lights.
So that's
Yeah.
not much.
No, right, we're gonna be replacing the rigging on the stage, so there's not a lot of infrastructure work that has to happen. They're gonna pull down the old rigging on the stage, and you're gonna put up new code compliant rigging, and then hang new lights, new curtains. So when you look at the scope of the project, I'd be shocked if,
But it's small, it's just $1 million.
yes, it's small, right, I know,
Tiny.
tiny,
Oh, my goodness.
that's right.
Unbelievable.
$1 million. So I would say that
I know,
the longest wait time will be probably the lead time to get things.
get the
here,
materials.
to Get the materials, yes.
Back order, they're on the ship. they're gonna make it.
Exactly. No, that's kind of, that was, you know, I'll just keep it, you know, simple for the operations
City.
report this month.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dana. Moving on to our superintendent's report. And Tim.
Yes. A lot has transpired since our last meeting and plenty more in the waning days of November. So next week, we have an abridged week on Monday and Tuesday, half days on both. Monday is our parent-teacher conference day, so there'll be meetings in the afternoon and in the evenings. And then Tuesday is our emergency evacuation drill, so students will have half days on both of those. We've had a couple of in-house productions since our last meeting as well. We had something of a rarity for us, which was an elementary performance, thanks to the leadership of Parker Scanio. Parker, for his capstone project, took on the task of herding cats, and he and his mentor Jessica Deeb did so masterfully. The production of Pinocchio came in at about a half an hour long, maybe just slightly less. It was to the rafters. It was extremely well attended, and I know from talking to the elementary students that they felt super cool to be on the big stage in the big school. So that was a lot of fun. And our drama club just finished their performance of A Beggar on Horseback over the weekend, which also had very strong attendance. So we want to thank Mr. Gotham and all the students for their efforts in the drama world. It has been since Halloween that we have convened, and so I would be remiss to not mention how just unseasonably warm and fantastic Halloween was for the district this year. It afforded us to have comfortable activities outside, which included our trunk or treat at the Olympic Center, the costume parade at the Elderwood Nursing Home, our annual Main Street Parade, and our Halloween dance at the Olympic Center, all of which were coordinated by Mr. Clark through Community Schools, and all of which were successful and positive. So we had a nice end of October. Earlier in the month, we had the Youth Climate Summit take place at the Wild Center in Tupper Lake. Our middle high school environmental club students attended this. It's a 2-day conference. I was able to go for the first time this year and be a part of it with Mrs. Morgan and Ms. Patnode and the students. And I got to witness some lectures from Kurt Stager from Paul Smith, just talking about how the Adirondacks is constantly changing. And a number of our students who have since graduated from Lake Placid were actually there presenting different things. So it was really great to see our students having that success down the road. I may have referenced in the past, but the North Alba Child Care Committee is an active committee that I represent the district on. And we've made very strong inroads in this department over the last couple of months. Last year, the goal was to accumulate information on the need for childcare at different age levels, from infant all the way to toddler. And we've now moved into a phase where the partners on the committee are actively looking at putting forth a childcare solution starting next year in September. So we're really excited about the progress. The entire committee all piled into our Suburban last week. I drove us all to Lake George. And I almost took the bus. We were one person shy away. I was grateful to take the Suburban. We spent the day at a conference hosted by the Adirondack Foundation on strengthening the social safety net. And there is a competitive grant amongst the region for programs such as the one that we're putting forth with our partners to try and address this critical aspect of the safety net. So it was a very day well spent at Lake George. And I really appreciate the work of the town of North Alba representatives, the village of Lake Placid, St. Agnes School for their work on this. So I'll be updating the board on this over the course of the year, but all signs are pointing to a very positive result for the community next year.
That's great.
Over the weekend, the thrift shop and food pantry celebrated its opening of the new facility at a meteoric pace. 10 months since the initial steering committee meeting last year, the building is now operational. The food pantry will open this coming week, and a few weeks later, the thrift shop will open. So we're super excited to see that development for the community. And I want to thank John for attending on behalf of the board, and also Daniel Cash, former board member, attended. That was one of the items that I know Daniel was certainly passionate about up until his departure from the board. So there were over 100 people there, lots of honored guests, and it was a feel-good moment, to say the least. Very proud to be there. Tomorrow is our National Honor Society induction at 6 p.m. We have a particularly big class of inductees this year, which is great. That is indication of academic success. And I also am particularly proud that we have 4 seniors who are being inducted. So you can be inducted earlier than that. And so for a senior to be able to join means that they made progress over the course of their years, and kind of a culmination for them. That's a celebration. So I'm excited for that.
Tim, what typically grade level do they become inducted, and what's the criteria?
Yeah, it's 10 through 12. Yeah, 10 through 12.
And then what's the criteria? Is it GPA? or-
GPA, and then reference letters, and like overall. I'm feigning the word here, but
The character.
character.
leadership.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah.
I'm trying to think of the criteria. Yes.
So character. How do they embody the the different aspects of National Honor Society? And I'm a little embarrassed I didn't know that, because I was the Honor Society advisor for like 10 years. But we were always more concerned about lighting the candles and ironing the tablecloths before the ceremony. So
And is anybody else interested in going? Last call. Okay, that's all right.
we'll represent the board in good fashion, and thanks to Ms. Adsit for her support as the advisor and working with the students. We've had 2 wood strips since our last go around here. Both 9th grade groups, a 9th grade girls group and boys group, attended. So we're grateful for Tammy Morgan also attending, and Mr. Baker. And then our fall season has come to an end. A very successful season for our athletes and our coaches. Some of the highlights toward the latter part of the year really centered around the success of our varsity girls volleyball team. They took the Section 7 Class D championship and had a wonderful season. They advanced to play against Chateauguay and ultimately fell in Messina. And then our varsity girls cross country team took the Section 7 Class D championship as well. They advanced to the state championship meet in Queensbury, and they took second place as a team. So
Great.
second place across the state is pretty phenomenal. We also had some individual performances that were outstanding on the boys' side. Aiden Fay and Lila Fay each earned first place finishes in the Class D section. So a dominant performance once again by our cross country team under the tutelage of Mel Frazier and Haley Fermonti. So certainly grateful for their work there. And there are many, many highlights there for the board's reference. So if you have some time and haven't already looked those over, lots of great things to celebrate with regards to our athletes. And we are now moving our way towards the winter season, and practices are underway. We had our coaches meeting last week, so from out of the frying pan and into the furnace we go for athletics.
Sure, that's very good.
That's my report.
Any questions, anybody? Okay, we're moving on to our policy committee report, and this is a policy first read, and I think Tim is going to share with us some information.
Yes, absolutely. So one of the benefits of our present schedule, our board calendar of meetings, is that some of the subcommittee work that doesn't always have a home, we can find in the months where we only have one meeting. And this was certainly the case with our policy committee meeting. So in the end, we reviewed 10 policies, 2 of which we're finalizing for our next meeting, but we have 8 for the board's review tonight. So I'll just give a cursory overview of the impetus for changes and any specific information. I'll also add that Don was in attendance as the newest member of the policy committee. So thanks for attending, Don. And if you have any insight to add in as I review these, just please interrupt me. So the first policy that is up for review and change is the school district record policy. And really the purpose of these changes is to account for Education Law 2D, which has very specific language about how school districts must restrict students' identifiable information. So our school district records policy, as amended, now has that specific language in it. The next policy, a little out of order here, is our, we pulled graduation ceremonies for next one, Karen, right?
Yeah.
Okay, is pertaining to corporal punishment. So the NISBA policy update came forth and recommended that we amend this policy to remove specific language that allowed the restraint of a student to protect district property. Under the law and under our policy as of now, the only time in which a student would be restrained physically is in the event that they would harm themselves or other imminent danger. But previous iterations of the policy did include language that also made it permissible to restrain to protect district property. And so that policy adjustment has been accounted for in here, which is in keeping with the law. Our next policy has to do with student records. This is another policy that had some changes mostly related to specific provisions of law. Ed Law 2D, once again, in referencing what materials must be protected for students and the method in which they can be disclosed to the appropriate parties. And the second is the Protection of Pupil Rights Act, which talks about the rights that parents have in assuring that their students' data is protected. So we spent some time reviewing that policy. And I believe that we're at student privacy.
Yes.
Okay, yep. Student privacy, once again, these changes flow from the addition of the Ed Law 2D language. Is this, let me just check to make sure one of these has to do with our survey process. This is it, yes. So this also reaffirms language about how students can be surveyed and for what purposes. And one of the other changes in this policy is that we did not have specific language whereby a parent could seek the contents of a survey to make an informed decision, and what the response time would be before their child would take a survey. So we've since changed that policy so that if, let's say, we work with an agency that specializes in mental health services, which is something that we do. We have several agencies, prevention team. We work with Essex County Mental Health. If they want to canvass all of the schools within the county, then under our policy and under the law, the Pupil Rights Act, parents can request to see that survey in advance, and they have up until 3 days of the administration of the survey to request it. So we didn't have any of that information in there. It's just trying to enable parents to make more informed decisions about some of these things. The policy itself talks about the types of questions and content that would require parental consent. And one thing that's important to note is annually we ask a series of questions that are markers for our strategic plan, about how we're doing and how their experience is as, just as students, academically, interpersonally, socially. None of those meet the criteria that would skew our data and not having a reasonable rate of response. So that's I think a good balance for our district. Those were really the impetus of the changes that were in here. There was also some language that was added to the bottom of this particular policy that codified at length what an invasive physical examination is. And at first the committee was taken aback by some of this language, but then we began to analyze some examples that would necessitate a quote invasive physical examination as defined under federal law. Some of the things that would be in there is if a student has a splinter and needs a splinter removed, well, now that is technically a procedure. It includes, an incision in the body. So there's very specific language that we had to include in here to comport with federal law about what constitutes an invasive physical examination and when parents will be notified when those happen. The only exceptions are emergencies, where it's a life or death situation and the school nurse acting, for the goodwill of a student is forced to act within her capabilities. But that was an interesting dialogue amongst the policy committee, for sure, that language. Next up, okay, great. So voter registration, we had to, in our policy, specify how we specifically encourage and support the registration of students. And our prior policy did not have any specificity to it. So our new policy has specific language in there about how students are informed and walk through the registration process through their participation in government classes. That we also have resources spread throughout the main office and the building, and we have QR codes so students can access those to pre-register or register in compliance with the law. Just finding my way back here, so thanks for your patience. Purchasing. So this was a very easy policy to amend. Basically, our purchasing policy, purchasing authority just indicates that we have our organizational meeting in July that we list the name of our purchaser. So that was what that policy was regarding. The next policy is about the use of surveillance cameras. And we added some specific language about the appropriate use of surveillance cameras. And also added some very specific language about only the superintendent or a designee will have the ability to surveil district property within the confines of the law. So that was an important addition that we included in that. Thank you, Colleen. I appreciate that. When I click on the policy to hone in on it, it takes me out of that section. I gotta go to a whole new area. So I appreciate that. Conditional appointment. This has to do with the rare occasions when we have an employee that is needed and has gone through the process, but there's a space between either their review and approval by the board and their landing in the district. So occasionally we have to retroactively appoint someone in those instances. Usually it happens at the start of the year or in the summer. And so this policy has to do with specific language about Ed Law 2D and pupil rights once again, that when we appoint someone prior to their, when we post someone in the building prior to their official appointment by the board, that they are given explicit understanding about what they can and cannot disclose about a student. So that was the final policy that we reviewed. I know I'm giving a cursory overview, and we certainly, if anyone has any specific language questions, we can get into that. Much of the policy committee meeting is devoted to that. Don, did you have anything that I missed, or?
No, you covered it, the changes.
No, a lot of good work. Sure.
Well, if you have an opportunity and want to look those over again, and at our next meeting on the 10th, we'll see if there's any questions or suggestions for amendments, and then we'll make the recommendation for the board to approve this.
Thank you. Moving on to information to the board, there are 3 things under public content to look over: the audit quarterly claims report, the extracurricular activity report, and also the National Honor Society ceremony. And then under exec content, we'll certainly look over those issues. But I think
And one of them should be
John-
public, yeah, John.
Yeah, John wanted to speak about the Educational Opportunity Fund, looking for board representation. So
Thank you just for touching on this. I was the representative, actual liaison, non-voting participant to the Educational Opportunity Fund last year. I kind of retired out at the beginning of this academic year. I've been on a lot of committees in my long career. This is actually one of the best committees I've ever been on in terms of governance, warning people, what's going to be on the agenda, following the agenda, timely minutes, active participation of the group, and actually very well functioning subcommittees of the main group. It's really quite astounding. I was very surprised. I kind of figured it was going to be one of these kind of feel good kind of things, but it's definitely not. And what there has been in the past, Dan Cash did it before me, that I acted as a liaison. The group wants to maintain continuity with other than themselves, so they get kind of bilateral discussions going back and forth if it's appropriate. They just want to, it's an outreach kind of thing, which I think is a good idea. The commitment is once a month for an hour. They meet at like 5 to 6 o'clock. They keep on the agenda pretty good. As I said, it's a well-functioning group. They have a website, and if anybody's potentially interested, I suggest you go to their website. It's not on here, but if you just want to jot it down, even if you just want to look at it, it's the edopfund.org. It's EDOPFUND, all run together on .org. They've got the members on there. They've got the mission statement. They talk about what they do and why they do it. And it's a very, very nice website. I would encourage somebody, probably more likely somebody who's involved in, has kids in the school right now or recently did, because they get a chance to really have a feel for what this is all about. Just let me know and I'll put you in touch with Roger Catania, who's the chair, and maybe a couple other people, and you can kind of talk with them, kind of scope it out, but they do really want to have a liaison from this group. And, I said that I do my best to
Yeah.
solicit. Yeah, you don't all have to raise your hand at the same time. But anyway, I would encourage, and I'm glad to help you out, but go to their website. That'll give you a really good picture of what they do and who's on the board. And I think you'll find there's a lot of people on there that already know. So.
I just threw the link up on.
Yeah,
the-
no, it's a
on
really
Board Docs.
worthwhile.
Oh, did you? Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it.
And just expounding on that, some of that content too, if you'll permit me, Colleen. If anyone is interested in the trip to Proctor's Theater, just let me know. That there's information on there, and each year the fifth graders are always great about inviting board members who wish to attend.
And I've been very fortunate to go
No,
a
it
couple
sounds
of
fun.
years. Yeah, it is.
No, it sounds great. Let's see, 5A minutes, I believe, was under consent. So moving on to personnel. Recommended action, approve the following items which are included in the consent agenda. 6B, long-term teacher appointment. 6C, teaching assistant appointment. 6D, teaching assistant appointment. 6E, mentor appointment. 6G, CSEA title change. 6A, CSEA title change. 6I, CSEA title change. 6J, CSEA title change. 6K, CSEA title change. 6L, teaching staff maternity leave request. 6M, winter coach resignation. 6-0, appointment of additional winter volunteer coaches for the 24-25 season. And 6P, substitute pay increase. I have motion for those items. We have to go back. There's somebody that is not part of that, but at least a motion for the ones that are in the consent. Any discussion on any of those?
Who's the second?
I'll second. Discussion?
Just to contextualize a few of these things, Karen did confirm to me, this is not our largest consent personnel agenda in history. My first year here, we did have up to S.
Yeah, there were a lot.
Really?
Yes, but this is really reflective of a couple of different things. A lot of these are title changes that speak back to the CSEA contract. We included new job titles in that, which included the groundskeeper role, the school secretary role. So shifting some of the staff who qualify, who are in those positions to that role is a component of the negotiation we have with the unit. And then just basically the other major area is just, we've had an influx of students at the elementary school that require additional supports. We're certainly excited to have the additional students attending. And so, the appointments B, C, and D are all reflective of those needs.
So if you'd like to vote, I believe it popped up for the initial, and then we're going to go back to one that was not under consent.
There was actually two.
Oh.
It's because I removed the other one. You didn't know I removed it, but Ryan asked me to remove it, the winter coach appointment. So
Okay.
that's 6F and 6M.
Okay, so.
And
we'll do
it's 7 yes.
Okay. So we will go back to 6F. Recommended action upon the recommendation of the superintendent, accept the retirement of Tracy Ridenauer, our account clerk, effective April 18th, 2025. I have a motion for that, please.
Second.
Discussion.
Dana and I are fortunate to work with and Karen with Tracy and have, certainly for my case, the past 3.5 years, and Dana and Karen more years beyond that. And
Yeah.
Tracy is a component of that team that just laid down that completely clean audit, for which we're all grateful. So she's a valued member of the team, and in typical high-class fashion will be leaving us in good hands by assuring a clean transition with her successors. So we're grateful to Tracy for her service.
Great employee, we wish her the best. Please vote. Secretary.
I'm just waiting for Ron.
I didn't have a pie.
Yes, okay. 7 yes.
So.
There it is.
And then we're going back, the resignation of the winter coach. We have a winter coach appointment. Recommended action upon the recommendation of the superintendent, appoint Matthew St. Louis as co-head coach of the girls hockey team. May I have a motion, please?
I'll move it.
Second.
I will abstain as he's failing.
Ryan is abstaining. Any
Oh, we
discussion?
didn't vote yet.
If not, please vote. Mine didn't pop up. Oh, there it is.
So that's 6 yes and 1 abstention.
Moving on to additional action items, 7A was under consent. 7B, donation acceptance. Recommended action, whereas Lake Placid Central Schools Board of Education Policy Number 6255, donations, gifts, and grants to the district, allows for the superintendent of schools to accept on behalf of the board gifts, donations, and grants having a value of less than $1,500. Whereas monies have been granted as follows. Adirondack Medical Center in the amount of $7,546.80 for Community Schools Fund. Now therefore be it resolved in accordance with policy 6255, the Board of Education hereby accepts the checks from Adirondack Medical Center in the amount of $7,546.80 for the Community Schools Fund. May I have a motion, please?
So was that Dawn and John?
Any discussion?
These are all funds that were garnered from the Lake Placid Classic race. So we're grateful to all of the organizers and for Rick Preston, who incepted that race and has maintained it in duration.
Fabulous.
7 yes.
Moving on to 7C, recommended action, whereas Lake Placid Central School Board of Education Policy 6255, donations, gifts, and grants to the district allows for the superintendent of schools to accept on behalf of the board gifts, donations, and grants having a value of less than $1,500. Whereas monies have been granted as follows: Adirondack Foundation in the amount of $4,000 for the Lucy Family Scholarship. Now therefore be it resolved in accordance with policy 6255, the Board of Education hereby accepts the checks from the Adirondack Foundation for the scholarship as referenced above in the total amount of $4,000. May I have a motion, please?
Move it.
Discussion?
Thank you to the Lucy family. Ongoing support, we're grateful.
No, very grateful. Please vote.
Seven yes.
Moving on to 7D, recommended action, whereas Lake Placid Central School Board of Education Policy 6255, donations, gifts, and grants to the district allows for the superintendent of schools to accept on behalf of the board gifts, donations, and grants having a value of less than $1,500. Whereas monies have been granted as follows: Adirondack Foundation in the amount of $3,900 for the 5th grade trip to Albany Fund at Adirondack Foundation. Now therefore be it resolved in accordance with policy 6255, the Board of Education hereby accepts the checks from the Adirondack Foundation for the scholarship as referenced above in the total amount of $3,900. May I have a motion, please?
Yes.
Any discussion?
Thank you to AdOp Fund for their fundraising over the years to endow the cost of this trip. They're a wonderful partner.
We definitely are. Please vote.
7 yes. One more, Colleen.
I know, going on to E. Recommended action, whereas Lake Placid Central School Board of Education Policy 6255, donation gifts and grants to the district, allows for the superintendent of schools to accept on behalf of the board gifts, donations, and grants having a value of less than $1,500. Whereas monies have been granted as follows. John and Patricia Hopkinson in the amount of $10,000 for the creation of a scholarship fund for environmental science. Now therefore be it resolved in accordance with policy 6255, the Board of Education hereby accepts the checks from John and Patricia Hopkinson for the scholarship as referenced above in the total amount of $10,000. May I have a motion, please?
I'll second.
Any discussion?
Thanks, John.
Thank you, John.
John.
Thank
I
you.
was gonna say, you should thank my wife.
Well,
Thank you,
that's
Patricia, as well.
That's wonderful. What a great donation.
This will be the first year of the scholarships.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's bad.
Please vote.
6 yes and 1 abstention.
Let's see, 6F is consent. 6G and H are both consent. I, the external audit report approval. Recommended action, whereas Telling and Associates have prepared the financial report for the Lake Placid Central School District for the year ended June 30th, 2024. Whereas Mr. Kyle Lucier presented the financial report for the year ended June 30th, 2024 to the Board of Education on November 19th, 2024. Be it resolved, the Board of Education hereby accepts the financial report for the year ended 2024 by Telling and Associates. May I have a motion, please?
I will second.
That was Dawn, right?
Any discussion? Please vote.
There it is. There it is.
7 yes.
J is under consent. Karen, was Kay taken out the tax correction?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we still don't have, it's gonna
Looming
keep,
correction.
it's gonna keep moving
I know,
because
losing that.
we don't have the proper paperwork.
No, that's fine. Moving on to linking goals with agenda, there's certainly lots of things that we could reference. Anybody have any thoughts on some of our goals and objectives that we've met?
I guess students first and foremost with the upcoming trip to Proctor's.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I think number 3, community outreach and involvement with all of the work that's being done with the potential childcare situation in our community, and also the new thrift shop. Finance, number 6, with all of the fiscal reports that we've been receiving in audits. Anybody else have anything? If you come up with something later, certainly you can reach out to either myself or Karen if you'd like to add something after the meeting. Moving on to the second good of the cause. Do we have anything, Karen?
No.
No. Our next meeting date and location is December 10th here at 5 p.m. Anybody have anything on old agenda topics that would like to bring up again? New agenda topics?
When will we revisit the school safety officer topic?
So that is, we can add that as an old agenda topic for our next meeting, if that's helpful.
I don't have anything to add right this minute, but I don't want that conversation to.
Oh, I don't think it's going to.
It's definitely not languishing, yeah.
Okay.
Just contextually, so we've reached out to an organization called Alteris Security Consulting, and they are doing a full emergency plan review, all of our site review. They'll actually be here on Friday of this week. So they're the true experts in the field. They represent 65 schools in New York State and 600 nationwide. So, you know, as I was preparing, you know, my thoughts for the board to help make an informed decision, it occurred to me that existentially, I am still a history teacher and do not have the sort of background in law enforcement that, you know, represents such a holistic view, you know, for such an important topic. So I should have the findings of that, if not by December, then by January. I'll share it with the board at that time.
That's great.
So I added that as an old agenda topic.
Okay, all right, that's great. So we're not adjourning the meeting yet because we're moving into an executive session, and recommended action is a motion to go into executive session for the purposes of discussing contracts and a lease agreement. May I have a
I move
motion,
it.
please?
It was wrong, and Ryan.
If so, please vote.